I was kneeling among the jade orchids of Master Hao Kun's estate, my fingers working through the dew-heavy soil, when I first heard his voice. "You missed a spot," someone said softly behind me. I looked up, startled. A young man crouched beside me, broad shoulders, eyes the color of river stones, hands scarred from stable work. Slaves weren't supposed to speak to each other during work hours, especially not across the invisible lines that separated house servants from stable hands. "Where?" I whispered, glancing around for the overseers. "There," he replied, pointing to a patch of weeds near the fountain. "But don't worry, I'll get it." Before I could protest, he was already moving, his hands working quickly to clear the stubborn roots. When he finished, he turned back to me with a small smile. "Thank you," I breathed. "I'm Bo Jun," he said quietly. "I work in the stables." "Lan Xi," I replied, surprised at how easily my name came. "I've seen you in the kitchen sometimes," he continued. "You always look so careful." I didn't know how to answer that.
Careful was how slaves survived.
"What's happening here?" The voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Young Master Feng Wei emerged from behind the ornamental screen, his silk robes pristine, his expression curious rather than angry. But I had learned not to trust that look. "Nothing, young master," I stammered, dropping my eyes to the ground. "Just tending the gardens." "I can see that," Feng Wei replied smoothly. He stepped closer, and I could smell the expensive oils he used in his hair. "And you, stable boy?" "Helping with the weeds, young master," Bo Jun answered, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. Feng Wei's gaze moved between us, lingering on me in a way that made my skin crawl. "How helpful. Lan Xi, isn't it?" "Yes, young master," I whispered. "Come see me in the pavilion after evening meal," he commanded. "There are matters to discuss." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice level. "Yes, young master." Feng Wei smiled then, the expression never reaching his eyes, before turning and walking away with the lazy confidence of someone who owned everything he surveyed, including us. When he was gone, Bo Jun moved a little closer. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. I wanted to say no. I wanted to explain that young Master Feng Wei had been summoning me more frequently lately, that his matters to discuss made me feel sick with dread. Instead, I just nodded. "I should go," I murmured, gathering my tools. "Wait," Bo Jun said. "If you ever need anything, if there's ever trouble." He didn't finish the sentence, but something in his voice made me look up. There was kindness in his eyes. Real kindness. The kind I hadn't seen in so long I'd forgotten it existed. "Thank you," I said again, meaning it more than he could know. 3 hours later, I found myself walking the stone path toward the pavilion, my feet heavy as lead. The pavilion stood at the edge of Master Hao Kun's estate, its red pillars rising like bloodstains against the evening sky. Young Master Feng Wei was waiting, reclining on silk cushions, a cup of wine in his manicured hand. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and shadow. "Ah, Lan Xi," he said, not bothering to sit up. "Come, sit beside me." I remained standing. "You wish to speak with me, young master?" Feng Wei's eyes narrowed slightly. I said sit. I had no choice. I knelt on the cushion he indicated, keeping as much distance as I dared. "Better," he murmured, taking a long drink. "Tell me, have you been happy in my father's service?" The question was a trap, they always were. "I am grateful for the opportunity to serve, young master," I replied carefully. "Grateful," he repeated, tasting the word. "But not happy." I said nothing. Feng Wei set down his cup and leaned forward. "I could make you happy, Lan Xi. I could give you things, pretty clothes, your own room, enough food to fill your belly. All you have to do is be grateful." His hand reached out to touch my cheek, and I forced myself not to flinch. "Young master, Sure," he whispered. "No need for words. Just gratitude." His fingers traced down my neck, and I closed my eyes, trying to disappear inside myself the way I'd learned to do. But for some reason, I found myself thinking of the stable boy from this morning, Bo Jun. There had been something different about him, something that didn't want anything from me. I should return my duties, I said, pulling back. Feng Wei's expression darkened. Your duties are whatever I say they are. Of course, young master. But the other servants will wonder. Let them wonder, he snapped. Then, catching himself, he forced his charming smile back into place. But you're right, of course. We must be discreet. For now. He dismissed me with a wave, but as I reached the pavilion steps, his voice stopped me. Oh, and Lan Xi? Stay away from the stable boy. I wouldn't want you to get distracted from your duties. The warning chilled me to the bone. Over the following weeks, I found myself thinking about Bo Jun more than I should have. We would pass each other in the corridors or catch glimpses across the courtyard, and each time there would be a small nod, a brief smile. Nothing the overseers would notice, but enough to remind me that someone had shown me kindness without expecting payment. It was a month before we spoke again. I was carrying water buckets from the well when one of them slipped from my aching hands, splashing across the stones. I knelt to clean it up, fighting back tears of frustration, when someone crouched beside me. Here, let me help, Bo Jun said quietly, using his own cloth to soak up the spilled water. You'll get in trouble, I whispered, glancing around the empty courtyard. It's early yet. The overseers are still breaking their fast. He wrung out his cloth and looked at me seriously. You look tired. I was tired. Young Master Feng Wei had been summoning me twice a week now, sometimes more. Each visit left me feeling smaller, more hollow. I'm fine, I lied. No, you're not, Bo Jun said gently. And that's all right. None of us are fine here. Something in his voice made me really look at him for the first time. There were fresh bruises on his arms, and I could see the edge of a whip mark beneath his collar. What happened? I asked. Someone reported that I was insolent, he replied with a bitter smile. Apparently, looking the overseer in the eye counts as insolence. Without thinking, I reached out to touch the bruise on his wrist. He didn't pull away. I'm sorry, I whispered. Not your fault, he said. But thank you. It's been a long time since anyone cared about my bruises. We stayed like that for a moment, kneeling by the well in the early morning light, and I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed, connection. I should go, I said finally, but I didn't move. The old shrine, Bo Jun said suddenly. Do you know it? At the edge of the estate? I nodded. Everyone knew about the crumbling shrine, though no one went there anymore. If you ever want to talk, he continued, really talk. I go there sometimes after the evening meal, when I can't sleep. It's too dangerous, I replied, but my heart was already racing. Maybe, he admitted, but some things are worth the risk. 3 days later, I found myself walking toward the shrine in the moonlight, my pulse hammering with fear and anticipation. The shrine stood in ruins, its stone walls half collapsed, weeds growing between the broken tiles. But in the moonlight, it looked almost beautiful, like something from a poem about forgotten gods and lost love. Bo Jun was waiting in what had once been the main hall, sitting on a piece of fallen pillar. When he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that made my chest tight. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said softly. I wasn't sure either, I admitted, settling beside him on the cold stone. For a while we just sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, crickets in the grass, wind through the broken walls, the distant hoot of an owl. What do you dream about? Bo Jun asked suddenly. Dream? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Slaves don't get to dream. Everyone dreams, he insisted, even if they pretend not to. I considered this, staring up at the stars visible through the ruined roof. I used to dream about having enough food, I said finally, about sleeping without fear, about being clean. And now I dreamed about gentle eyes and kind voices. about someone who helped with spilled water without expecting anything in return. But I couldn't say that. What about you? I asked instead. I dream about the mountains, Bo Jun said, his voice growing distant. My grandmother used to tell me stories about them before she was sold. She said there are places up there where no one owns the land, where you can drink from streams that taste like snow and sleep under stars that belong to everyone. It sounds impossible, I whispered. Maybe, he agreed. But I'd rather dream of impossible things than not dream at all. We met like this 5 more times over the next month, always careful, always listening for footsteps that might mean discovery. Slowly, we began to share more than dreams. Bo Jun told me about his childhood in a village by the river, about watching his parents be sold to different masters when he was 10. I told him about the kitchens where I'd learned to cook, about the books I'd glimpsed in Master Hao Kun's study, and wished I could read. I could teach you, Bo Jun offered during our 6th meeting. My grandmother taught me letters before she was taken. I remember some of it. That's forbidden, I said automatically. So is this, he replied, gesturing between us. But we're here anyway. The lesson started the next week. Using a stick to scratch letters in the dirt floor of the shrine, Bo Jun patiently showed me how to write my own name, then simple words like water and sky and free. It was during one of these lessons, as I struggled to copy the characters for mountain, that I realized I was falling in love with him. You're getting better, Bo Jun said, examining my scratched attempts at writing. Look, mountain is almost perfect. I smiled, absurdly pleased by the praise. I never thought I'd be able to do this. You can do anything you set your mind to, he replied, and the way he said it made me believe it might be true. We were sitting closer together now, our shoulders touching as we bent over the makeshift lesson. I could smell the clean scent of hay that always clung to his clothes, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Bo Jun, I said quietly, not looking up from the scratched dirt. Yes, thank you. For all of this. For seeing me. He was quiet for a moment. Then his finger touched my chin, gently tilting my face toward his. How could I not see you? He asked. You're the most beautiful thing in this ugly place. Before I could think of all the reasons why it was impossible, why we were both bound for heartbreak, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he responded, his hands coming up to frame my face. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Lan Xi, he whispered, resting his forehead against mine. I know, I said. I know it's impossible. I know we have nothing to offer each other, but I love you, he interrupted, the words falling between us like a prayer. I know it's foolish, I know we're slaves with no future, but I love you. The words I'd been trying not to think, trying not to feel, spilled out of me. I love you too. We made love that night on a bed of wildflowers that had grown up through the broken floor of the shrine. It was clumsy and desperate and perfect, a declaration of ownership over our own hearts in a world that owned everything else about us. Afterward, as we lay tangled together in the moonlight, Bo Jun traced patterns on my bare shoulder with his fingertip. What are you drawing? I asked drowsily. The character for free, he replied. So, you'll remember what it feels like. But our stolen happiness couldn't last forever. The next morning, as I tried to slip back to the servants' quarters before dawn, I ran straight into young Master Feng Wei. Well, Feng Wei said, his voice silky with false surprise. Someone's been taking evening walks. I stood frozen in the gray pre-dawn light, knowing there was dirt in my hair and the smell of wildflowers on my skin. Knowing I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who had spent the night with her lover. Young master, I stammered. I couldn't sleep. I was just walking, he finished for me. Yes, I can see that. Though you seem to have gotten rather disheveled during your walk. His eyes raked over me, taking in every detail, the grass stains on my clothes, the scratches from the shrine's stone walls, the glow that I knew must be written across my face. "Tell me," Feng Wei continued conversationally, "did you enjoy your walk?" "Yes, young master," I whispered, because what else could I say? "Good. I'm glad you found it educational." He stepped closer, and I smelled wine on his breath. "Now, I think it's time we had another of our little talks. Meet me in my chambers tonight after the evening meal." "Young master, Tonight, Lan Xi. Don't make me send guards to fetch you." He walked away then, leaving me shaking in the courtyard. I knew, with the certainty of someone who had lived her entire life at the mercy of cruel men, that everything was about to change. That evening, as I walked toward young Master Feng Wei's chambers, I felt like I was walking to my execution. But it was worse than death waiting for me. It was the slow murder of everything that made life worth living. Feng Wei was waiting in his private study, a room I'd only glimpsed through doorways before. Rich carpets covered the floor, and shelves lined the walls, filled with books I would never be allowed to read. He sat behind a carved wooden desk, his fingers steepled, watching me with cold amusement. "Close the door," he commanded. I did, my hands trembling. "Now then," Feng Wei said, rising from his chair. "Let's discuss your future. I've decided to make you my personal servant. You'll have your own quarters in the East Wing, better food, finer clothes. All the privileges befitting your new responsibilities." I said nothing, knowing the trap was already sprung. "Of course," he continued, circling around the desk to stand before me. "Such a position requires absolute loyalty. Absolute dedication. There can be no distractions." "I understand, young master," I managed.
Do you?
"Because I'm not sure you do." His voice hardened. "You see, I know where you were last night, and I know with whom." My blood turned to ice. "The stable boy is strong," Feng Wei mused. "Good for heavy work. But I wonder how he'd fare with, say, 50 lashes for corrupting my property? Or perhaps 100. "Please," I whispered. "He did nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong?" Feng Wei laughed. "He touched what belongs to me. He put his hands on my property. That's theft, Lan Xi. And the punishment for theft is severe." He moved closer, close enough that I could see the cruel intelligence in his eyes. "But I'm prepared to be merciful," he said. "Accept my offer gracefully, serve me willingly, and your stable boy lives. Refuse." He shrugged eloquently. "And if I accept?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Then you'll have no time for evening walks," Feng Wei replied with a smile sharp as glass. "You'll be far too busy with your new duties." I closed my eyes, thinking of Bo Jun's gentle hands, his quiet voice teaching me to write my name. Thinking of the way he'd looked at me, not as property or prize, but as someone worth loving. "I need time to consider," I said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Feng Wei returned to his desk, settling back in his chair. "You have until tomorrow evening to give me your answer. I trust you'll make the right choice." As I walked back to the servants' quarters, I knew there was only one choice I could make. But I also knew I had to see Bo Jun one more time, had to hold him, had to memorize the feel of his arms around me, before I sacrificed everything to keep him alive. I slipped away to the shrine just after midnight, my heart breaking with every step. Bo Jun was already there, pacing anxiously among the ruins. "Lan Xi." He rushed to embrace me, and for a moment I let myself melt into his warmth. "I was worried when you didn't come yesterday. Are you all right?" "He knows," I said against his chest. "Young Master Feng Wei knows about us." Bo Jun's arms tightened around me. "What did he say?" I told him everything. The threats, the ultimatum, the impossible choice Feng Wei had given me. When I finished, Bo Jun was quiet for a long time. "So you'll do it," he said finally. "You'll accept his offer." "I have to. If I don't, he'll have you whipped to death. And if you do, he'll have you." Bo Jun's voice was rough with pain. He'll touch you and use you and break you piece by piece until there's nothing left of the woman I love. I'll survive, I said, though the words tasted like ashes. I always do. That's not living, Lan Xi. That's just existing. It's enough, I lied. As long as you're alive somewhere, breathing and dreaming about mountains, it's enough. Bo Jun pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. What if it doesn't have to be enough? What if there was another way? What do you mean? We could run, he said urgently.
Tonight. Right now.
We could try for the border, for those mountains I told you about. They'd catch us, I said automatically. The hunters never fail. Maybe they'd catch us, Bo Jun agreed. But maybe they wouldn't. And even if they did, at least we'd have tried. At least we'd have chosen our own path instead of letting them choose for us. I stared at him, my mind reeling. You're talking about suicide. Even if we made it past the hunters, where would we go? What would we eat? How would we survive? I don't know, he admitted. But I know I can't watch you sacrifice yourself for me. I won't let you pay that price. You don't have a choice, I said desperately. Neither of us do. We always have a choice, Lan Xi. Maybe not good choices, maybe not easy ones, but we always have a choice. He kissed me then, long and deep and full of desperate hope. When we broke apart, I could see the wild dream taking shape in his eyes. Think about it, he whispered. One chance at real freedom. One chance to live instead of just survive.
I wanted to say yes.
Every fiber of my being wanted to grab his hand and run into the night, to chase that impossible dream of mountains and streams and stars that belong to everyone. Instead, I said, I have to go. Feng Wei expects my answer tomorrow. As I walked back through the dark gardens, I tried to convince myself that sacrifice was the only rational choice. But Bo Jun's words echoed in my mind. We always have a choice. The next evening, I knocked on young Master Feng Wei's door with my decision made. Come in, Feng Wei called, and I entered to find him waiting behind his desk, a goblet of wine in his hand and satisfaction written across his face. I trust you've made your decision, he asked. Yes, young master, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I accept your generous offer. Excellent. He rose from his chair, moving around the desk toward me. I knew you'd see reason. As he approached, I forced myself to stand still, to not flinch when his hand touched my cheek. You'll move to your new quarters tonight, he said. I've had them prepared specially for you. Thank you, young master. And Lan Xi. His fingers traced down my neck. I trust there will be no more evening walks. No, young master. I understand my duties now. Good girl. He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. I think we're going to work very well together. The new quarters were everything he'd promised. A real bed with silk sheets, a window that looked out over the gardens, even a small table with paper and ink. It should have been luxury beyond imagining. Instead, it felt like the most beautiful prison ever built. For 3 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I smiled when Feng Wei visited, submitted when he touched me, even managed to seem grateful for his attentions. I told myself I was protecting Bo Jun, that his life was worth any price I had to pay. But each day, I felt pieces of myself disappearing. The woman who had learned to write her name in the dirt, who had made love under starlight, who had dared to dream of impossible things, she was dying by inches. And then, on a rain-soaked evening in late autumn, everything changed. I was serving dinner in the great hall when Master Hao Kun stood to make an announcement. My friends, he said, his voice carrying easily across the room filled with wealthy guests. Tomorrow we have a special entertainment planned. One of my slaves has been troublesome lately. Insolent. We'll be making an example of him in the courtyard. My blood turned to ice as I realized what was coming. 50 lashes should cure him of his pride, Master Hao Kun continued with cold satisfaction, and remind the others of their place. That night, as Feng Wei lay sleeping beside me in the silken bed that had become my cage, I stared up at the ceiling and knew I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't lie there safe and comfortable while Bo Jun was tortured for my sake. Bo Jun had been right. We always had a choice. I rose quietly, gathered the few belongings I could carry, and slipped out into the rain-soaked night. I found Bo Jun in the stables, checking on a lame horse despite the late hour. When he saw me standing in the doorway, soaked to the skin and trembling, his face went white. "Lan Xi, what are you doing here?" "They're going to whip you tomorrow," I said without preamble. 50 lashes, in front of everyone. Bo Jun's jaw tightened, but he didn't seem surprised. "I know. One of the grooms warned me." "Then you know we have to leave. Tonight."
We.
He searched my face. "What about Feng Wei? Your arrangement?" "I can't do it anymore," I confessed, tears mixing with rainwater on my cheeks. "I thought I could sacrifice myself to keep you safe, but watching you die slowly while I live in comfort, that's not love, Bo Jun. That's cowardice." He crossed the stable in 3 quick strides, pulling me into his arms. "Are you sure? Once we leave, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I said and meant it. "You were right. Some things are worth the risk." We spent the next hour preparing. Bo Jun gathered supplies from the stable stores: rope, a knife, dried meat, and hard bread meant for long journeys. I contributed the money I'd managed to save from my brief time as Feng Wei's personal servant, coins he'd given me for new clothes that I'd never spent. "The north wall," Bo Jun said as we prepared to leave. "There's a place where the stones have shifted. We can climb it. And after that? The forest. If we can stay ahead of them for the first day, we might have a chance." We both knew the odds. We both knew what happened to runaway slaves. But as we slipped through the rain toward the north wall, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. The wall was higher than it had looked from a distance, but Bo Jun boosted me up and then climbed after me with the easy grace of someone who'd spent his life doing physical labor. For a moment we crouched together on top of the stones, looking back at the estate that had been our prison for so long. "Ready?" Bo Jun asked. I took his hand. "Ready." We dropped down on the other side and ran into the forest, leaving our chains behind in the rain-soaked darkness. For 6 hours, we moved through the trees like spirits, following deer paths and dried stream beds. When dawn came, we were perhaps 15 miles from the estate. Not far enough, but a start. "We need to rest," Bo Jun said as we found shelter in a shallow cave. "Just for a few hours." I curled up against his chest, exhausted but strangely peaceful. "Do you think we'll make it?" "I don't know," he admitted, stroking my hair. "But I know I'd rather die free with you than live as a slave without you. Even if we only have a few days?" Even then. I was drifting off to sleep when the sound of horns echoed across the valley. Long, mournful notes that sent ice through my veins. "The hunt horns," I whispered. Bo Jun was already pulling me to my feet. "They're faster than I expected. We need to move." For 3 days, we ran. The hunters were relentless, skilled beyond anything we'd imagined. No matter how carefully we covered our tracks, how cleverly we doubled back or waded through streams to mask our scent, they remained close behind. On the first day, we saw their smoke rising in the distance. On the second, we heard their hounds baying across the valleys. On the third, we actually glimpsed one of them through the trees, a lean man in leather armor, moving with the patient determination of a predator who knew his prey was tiring. "We're not going to outrun them," I said as we huddled in a grove of pine trees, sharing the last of our bread. "No," Bo Jun agreed grimly. "But maybe we don't have to outrun them. Maybe we just have to outlast them." "What do you mean?" "The border is only 2 days away if we push hard. They can't follow us past the border. It would cause diplomatic problems their masters don't want." 2 days, I repeated, trying to find strength in the words. 2 days, Bo Jun confirmed, pulling me closer against the mountain chill. We've come this far. We can make it. But that night, as we sheltered in a cave barely large enough for both of us, I felt exhaustion settling into my very bones. We'd been living on berries and stream water, sleeping in brief, restless snatches, always listening for the sounds of pursuit drawing closer. "I'm slowing us down," I said quietly. "Don't be ridiculous." "I am. You could move faster without me, cover more ground." Bo Jun turned to face me in the dim light filtering through the cave mouth. "Lan Xi, listen to me. We're in this together. Whatever happens, we're in this together. But if something goes wrong, then we'll face it together," he interrupted firmly. "I didn't run away to save myself. I ran away to save us." His words were meant to comfort me, but somehow they broke something inside me instead. "We're not going to make it," I whispered, the words torn from somewhere deep inside me. "They're going to catch us and drag us back, and Feng Wei will have you killed slowly, publicly, to make an example." "No," Bo Jun said with fierce determination, pulling me against his chest. "Don't let despair win now. Not when we're so close." "But it's true, isn't it?" My voice broke. "We were fools to think we could escape. Slaves don't get to write their own endings." "Then we'll make our own ending," he replied, kissing me with desperate tenderness. "These 3 days, Lan Xi, we've been free. We chose our path, made our own decisions. That's more than most people in chains ever get to taste." "It's not enough," I whispered against his lips. "Then we'll fight to make it more." We made love there against the rough stone walls, finding solace in each other's touch despite the cold mountain air and the uncertainty that lay ahead. Afterward, exhaustion finally claimed us both, and we fell asleep in each other's arms, drawing strength from our shared warmth. I woke to the sound of men's voices and the soft whisper of steel being drawn from sheaths. Bo Jun was already awake, his body tense as a bowstring as he peered through the cave mouth. "3 of them," he breathed, "plus the dogs. Can we run?" He shook his head grimly. "They've got us surrounded." A voice called out from beyond the rocks, cultured, almost polite. "You in the cave. Come out slowly, and no one needs to be hurt." Bo Jun looked at me, his eyes filled with a terrible resolve. "There's another way out of this," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, he pulled a small knife from his pack, the one we'd used to cut bread and prepare game during our desperate flight. The blade caught the pale morning light like a shard of hope-turned weapon. "No," I gasped, understanding immediately. "Bo Jun, no. It's better this way," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Quick and clean, instead of what awaits us back at the estate." "I won't let you," I said, grabbing his wrist. The voice outside called again, closer now. "Last chance. Come out or we come in." Bo Jun kissed me then, soft and brief, and full of goodbye. "I love you," he said. "Remember that. Whatever happens, remember that someone loved you enough to choose you over life itself." Before I could stop him, he pressed the knife into my trembling hands and rolled toward the cave mouth. "Stay hidden," he whispered. "Live, Lan Xi. Live free." Then he stood and walked into the morning light. "I'm here," he called to the hunters. "Just me. The girl escaped 2 days ago, probably halfway to the border by now." I crawled to the edge of the cave and watched through a gap in the rocks, the knife clutched against my chest. 3 men in leather armor stood in a semicircle, crossbows trained on Bo Jun's heart. Behind them, 2 large hunting dogs strained at their leashes, foam flecking their muzzles. The leader, a grizzled man with steel-gray hair, stepped forward. "Noble of you to surrender, boy. Foolish, but noble." "She's long gone," Bo Jun repeated, his voice steady despite the crossbows aimed at his heart. "Perhaps," the hunter replied, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it for a moment. "Or perhaps she's watching from whatever hole you crawled out of, thinking about doing something heroic." He raised his voice, calling toward the surrounding rocks. Girl, I know you can hear me. Show yourself now, and your lover dies quickly. Keep hiding, and we'll take our time with him. Bo Jun's eyes found mine through the gap in the stones. Slowly, deliberately, he shook his head, a final command, a last gift of love. She's not here, he said again, his voice ringing with conviction. The hunter sighed with theatrical disappointment. Have it your way. He nodded to his companions. Take him alive. The master wants to make an example. As the men moved forward with practiced efficiency, Bo Jun did something I'll carry with me until my dying breath. He smiled, not the broken smile of the defeated, but the fierce, radiant smile of a man who had seized control of his own destiny. Then he threw himself forward, impaling himself on the nearest crossbow bolt. The iron point punched through his chest with a wet, terrible sound. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, Bo Jun stood there with the shaft protruding from between his ribs, his eyes still locked on mine through the gap in the stones, that fierce smile still lighting his face. Then he fell, and the world shattered around me. The hunters cursed and argued over Bo Jun's body, their prize now worthless except as a warning to others. But as their initial shock faded, I heard the leader's voice cutting through the morning air. Search the area, he commanded. The girl's here somewhere. That fool didn't throw his life away for nothing. Should we spread out? One of the younger hunters asked. No need. She's trapped, nowhere to run with those cliffs behind her. We'll flush her out. My heart sank as I realized the truth. They hadn't believed Bo Jun's lie. Not completely. They were going to search every cave, every crevice, every shadow until they found me. And when they did, cornered and desperate, I would likely die fighting or worse, be taken back as a bloodied, broken example for the other slaves. All I could hear was the echo of Bo Jun's last words. Live, Lan Xi. Live free. I watched the light fade from his riverstone eyes, watched his chest still forever. And in that moment, I understood what he had given me. Not just his life, but his choice. He had chosen to die as a free man rather than return as a slave. He had chosen me over fear, love over survival. His sacrifice would mean nothing if I threw my life away now. He had died, so I could live, so I could carry the dream of freedom forward. If I forced them to hunt me down like a rabid animal, if I died here in this cave, then his death would be for nothing. Now I had to choose too, and the choice was clear. Slowly, with hands that no longer trembled, I stood and walked out of the cave. The hunters spun toward me, weapons raised, but I felt no fear. What was fear to someone who had already lost everything that mattered? There she is, I said, my voice carrying across the morning air with quiet dignity. Your missing prize. But even as they bound my hands and began the long journey back to captivity, I carried something they couldn't see, couldn't touch, couldn't steal. The memory of perfect freedom and the knowledge that I had been loved enough to die for. When we got back to the estate, they buried Bo Jun in the slaves' cemetery behind the estate, in that patch of unmarked ground where the forgotten were laid to rest. I wasn't permitted to attend the burial, but I watched from my window in the East Wing, back in my beautiful prison, now fitted with new locks to match my new status as a dangerous flight risk. Master Hao Kun had me flogged, of course, 20 lashes for running, 10 more for corrupting his property. But he didn't have me killed. Too much investment to simply discard, he reasoned with the cold calculation of a merchant. Young Master Feng Wei visited me that first night back, expecting to find me broken, grateful to be alive, ready to submit. Instead, he found something that unnerved him, a woman who looked at him without fear, who bore his touch with the distant endurance of someone whose spirit dwelt elsewhere. You'll learn to appreciate what I've given you, he said, but his voice lacked its old confidence. I said nothing. What was there to say? He had my body, as he always had. But my soul belonged to the mountains now, to the memory of a man who had taught me that love was a choice, and freedom was a state of mind. So I lived. I served. I endured. But I also planned. In the quiet hours before dawn, I practiced the letters Bo Jun had taught me, scratching them into the dirt floor with my fingernails. I memorized the layout of the estate, the guards' routines, the weak points in their security. I saved scraps of food, hoarded small coins, prepared for the day when I would honor his sacrifice by claiming the freedom he had died to give me. I remembered the feel of his hand in mine as we ran through the forest, the taste of stream water drunk in liberty, the sound of our laughter echoing off canyon walls. I remembered the way he looked at me, not as property or prize, but as someone worth dying for. Most importantly, I remembered his final words, "Live free." Bo Jun had died, so I could have a chance at freedom. I would not waste his gift. I would not rest, would not stop, would not surrender until I stood beneath those mountains he had dreamed of, or until I joined him in whatever realm awaited beyond this world of chains. This time, when I ran, it would be with purpose born of love and tempered by loss. This time, I would live free or die free, but never again would I accept the comfortable cage they offered in place of life.